Hey everyone, just wanted to record a quick addendum. There was a question yesterday about grapeseed oil and whether or not it was better than olive oil. I had never looked into that question specifically, so afterwards I did look it up, and I would say no, olive oil is better, at least from what I've read. Grapeseed oil is high in omega-6s, and we want to tend to avoid those because it's more of a process oil. The process going into making it is a little more chemical in nature. So again, the oils that I tend to use for my household are either olive oil that has a lower smoking point, but avocado oil has a high smoking point. And those usually are sufficient for our cooking needs and have many healthy omega-3s in the content as well. So just wanted to clear that up. Hope you guys enjoy the chat. And remember, none of this is personalized medical advice, and I don't always know the answer off the top of my head, and that's okay because, believe it or not, no one does. All right, have a good day. Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Fasting and Beyond. Tonight is a live Q&A, and I have my laptop in front of me. You'll see because I got a host of questions from my posts and from my DMs. And so what I'm going to do, I wanted to list them all out because you can't really toggle back and forth between your DMs and Instagram Live and stay live. So I have the questions here populated so I can make sure to answer all the pre-submitted questions. And then after we go through the pre-submitted questions, if anyone else submits questions during the show, I'll scroll back up through those and get to as many questions and answers as I can in 30 minutes. So all right, let's get started. Just for ease sake, I'm going to go ahead and start with the questions that were submitted all via IG, and then we'll move to other forums after that. So the first one is from If Keto, or I'm assuming Intermittent Fasting Keto for Life, IF Keto for Life. And it looks like it's a two-part question. So the first part of the question says, how can sparkling water, oh, sorry guys, forgot to give my disclaimer. Have to pause and do that. Obviously this is for just general information purposes only. This is not to be construed as medical advice because I don't know you or your personal situation, so I can't give personalized medical advice. As always, before starting any new lifestyle change, make sure to discuss it with your care provider. All right, so back to the question. And so the question says, how can sparkling water such as bubbly be calorie, sweetener free when it's obviously sweet? And then there was a part 2 to this question, which I'm assuming went with it, which says, worried about drinking such things during my eating window. So, I mean, I would agree. I don't drink bubbly. I tend to just stick with pure water. We're doing a 10-day water challenge, or black coffee and plain tea. And that's what I consume during my fasting window. I even moved away from consuming bone broth during my fasting window. I did that initially when I started fasting. And I mean, I think it helped, but it wasn't truly fasting. And so I've just kind of refined that over time to have more of a clean fast. I just find it works better for me. Sometimes people still get good results with not, technically pure fasting. So it really comes down to what works for you. But in terms of bubbly, the thing I would be concerned about it is that sweet taste, right? So if it's sweet, that still could potentially spike insulin. Probably not to the same degree as if you were eating a meal, right? But I just wouldn't do it. I mean, like if you're fasting, I would just want to get the benefits of my fast. So I think if it's pure, unflavored, sparkling water, that doesn't taste obviously sweet to you, because sparkling water is really supposed to just be water with carbon infused in it, and then natural minerals. So in theory, it really shouldn't break a fast, but you just got to be careful about which one you're doing. And when I start to see ones that say, they're raspberry flavored, and I think the same thing, like how to get the raspberry flavor in it. There was something done to it other than just blow it up with carbon dioxide, because carbon dioxide doesn't taste like raspberry. So personally, that's why I tend to stick with water, tea, and coffee during my fast. And I tend not to go for a lot of sparkling beverages or things that say that they're 0 calorie or yada, yada, yada. I just kind of stick with as close to natural as possible. So the next question is from Allie Sweeney. And this one is one that I hear a lot. So this is it true that 16-8 is only for maintenance and not good for weight loss? So I'll hear different people say different things. I will tell you in the experience that I've had with actually working with people, is that it just depends where you're starting at. So I do see people, especially if they're willing to clean up their diet and stop snacking, who do lose weight with 16-8. So I don't think that is an issue. I think the problem sometimes people run into with the 16-8 during their 8-hour window, they just constantly graze through their window. So if you're constantly grazing through your window, that's probably not going to work, because you really haven't changed up much, and you're kind of defeating what you've done in that fasting period of trying to avoid multiple food stimuli. So with 16-8, I think if you're going to do that method, it's important to have your discrete meals, but not just as a time as a grazer. Also, what are you drinking during your eating window? So we always talk about what you're drinking during your fasting window, but what about what you're consuming during your eating window? That can also be just as problematic, especially if your eating window is full with, diet pop, lots of sweetened beverages, things of that nature. So those can be reasons why. The other thing I notice is that people sometimes still combine caloric restriction with intermittent fasting. And again, you're going to get many different opinions on this. I'm sticking with my opinion that, let's be honest. If you're doing an 8-hour eating window, you're going to have to try very diligently to have, too many calories, if we're even acknowledging calories. So what I find is that people end up in caloric restriction. And so caloric restriction, with intermittent fasting, it doesn't necessarily work well, because it's not about the calories you're eating, it's the what are you eating, the quality of your food, and then you're giving yourself gut rest. So you have to give yourself adequate calories to function during that time period. That's why you'll see some people who they actually up their calorie intake, and they're like, oh wait, I'm losing weight, and that doesn't make sense. Well, it does, because your body was like, wait a second, I'm not getting enough calories to sustain my level of action. It's not the fact that you're fasting that's doing it. It's the fact that when you're eating, you're not eating enough. So be cognizant in your 16-8 that you are having, 2 full nutritious meals, and that you are actually sustaining your basal metabolic rate. Again, it's not necessarily the fasting, it's the fact that you're combining the caloric restriction, which we know that calories in, calories out for the majority of people. You may see some initial weight loss. It doesn't work long term. So that's my long-winded answer to that. Okay, so the next question is from SJ Hicks. Do you suggest doing keto with intermittent fasting? So I think keto and intermittent fasting is a lovely combination, just because a lot of people report when they are low carb. You don't necessarily have to be keto, but when you're going low carb and or keto, that they note increased satiety, and they naturally just don't feel as hungry. So then if you're not naturally feeling hungry, then it's very easy to add in a period of intermittent fasting. So I think the two work very well together. Synergistically, ketones share some of the same benefits and properties that you will get with intermittent fasting. But, because of that, you don't have to be keto to fast. You can do intermittent fasting and get benefits of intermittent fasting solely from doing intermittent fasting itself. But I have no problem with the combination of keto and intermittent fasting. When I usually, again, work with people, what we try to do is just find what whole foods diet or real foods diet, you'll hear me use that term a lot, rather than preferentially referencing to any one sort of dietary lifestyle. But finding a diet that composes of whole, real, natural foods that is low in refined, processed, sugary carbohydrates. So there's your component of low carb, which I'm always going to have a component of that because I just don't feel like you need, or it's beneficial to regularly consume refined, processed carbohydrates. Yes, every once in a while, no problem. But the problem is we haven't really figured out what once in a while means. For some people, that's 3 to 4 times a week. To me, that wouldn't be once in a while. So, but basically, intermittent fasting can really work with no matter what dietary approach you're using. Some will show better results than others. And so I find that when you tend to cut out or reduce your processed carbohydrates, then that just makes it results that much better. Reaching for whole, real foods, whatever that looks like for you, stuff that's not out of a can or out of a package, is always going to be a great way to go. All right. So looking at questions, looks like we just got another one. This is from Ryan Dome, and it says, how do you feel about 1 meal a day? So, 1 meal a day works well for a lot of people. So I don't have a problem with 1 meal a day, but what I find is that there are a lot of people who do 1 meal a day incorrectly, right? So what do I mean by that? Kind of piggybacking off of my response to 16.8 is if you're not able to consume adequate amount of calories during that 1 meal a day, because it's hard. I mean, to sit down and have a plate that's nutritious, nutrient dense, and not full of junk food and get 2,000 calories in one sitting, that's difficult. I mean, that's a lot of food all at once. And so a lot of people can't do that. I know that I can't do that. And so that would be my concern, is if you were chronically doing 1 meal a day and then not incorporating enough calories. Now, there's some clever ways to increase the caloric intake at that 1 meal, especially adding healthy fats like olive oil, or olive oil or avocado oil are some of my favorites. Sometimes coconut oil, even though people are like, ooh, coconut oil has saturated fat. Yeah, you can have coconut oil. Those natural things that you can add to your meal if you can't fit actually more food on, and will help your caloric intake. But that's what I kind of find is that 1 meal a day does work. You just got to get in your adequate calories. The other thing about 1 meal a day is that you can have variations of that. So there's lots of people who consider themselves 1 meal a day, but they actually have like a 2 to 4 hour eating window. So they'll open their eating window with a smaller meal, and then, they'll do some other things, occupy their time, and a couple hours later, they'll have their main meal. And that allows them, again, to get that adequate caloric intake. So there are a lot of ways that you can play around with it. But in general, again, as long as you're getting in the calories needed to sustain your activity, I think 1 meal a day is a myriad of approaches that do work that we have in our toolbox. All right, let me get to some of the questions that were submitted ahead of time, and then I'll go back to the Q&A ones that are popping up now. So since these were in my DMs and not publicly, I won't read your Instagram name, but hopefully you'll recognize your question. So is it possible to increase LDL levels from fasting? So that's an interesting question. So yes, it just depends on how long were you fasting before you had those labs drawn. So that's not to say that fasting itself is detrimental to cholesterol levels. But if we think about intermittent fasting as a time that mobilizes fat, if you have your lab work drawn after 16, 18, 20 hours of fasting, you're mobilizing a lot of fat. And that's what we want, right? You want to mobilize fat, but then your lab result is was based around an 8 to 12 hour fast, so that may skew your results. So if you are having, levels drawn or whatever, what I typically tell people is not to do a longer fast before you have that done, because it's going to throw some of those off. And then this brings me on like just a slight tangent with LDL. LDL really is a poor marker for prediction of cardiovascular disease. I know we always try to simplify it. It's the good cholesterol and the bad cholesterol, but a more accurate predictor of cardiovascular disease, when they reanalyzed the data from the Framingham Heart Study, was actually the total cholesterol to HDL ratio. And ratios under 5 are acceptable. Means you're doing fine. Probably could be better, but you're doing okay. And then levels under a ratio of 3.5 are like, you have really good cardiovascular health, because HDL cholesterol really is what more of a metric to focus on rather than LDL. So just to throw that out there. Now, there's another question that says, do women need to follow a different fasting protocol than men? Again, people are going to have different opinions, because either there was a paper on rats that showed different hormone levels or whatnot with different fasting ad lib protocols. But no, when I have dealt with people, I fast men and women the same, with the caveat that each plan really should be tailored to the individual, right? So I don't fast every woman the same that I work with in clinic. I wouldn't fast every man the same way that I work with clinic. I don't have a protocol that is for every person. You walk in to see me and it is the same protocol, because we have to look at nutrition, your lifestyle, when you're naturally hungry, what you're willing to build on, your activity level, your sleep, your stressors. There's so much other things that go into it. So what I, kind of chuckle at is when I'll see myths or things where it's like, well, women shouldn't do beyond 16/8. Well, why is that? I think the special thing, and it's not even special, right? This honestly should be for women and men, and whatever you identify as gender-wise. If you are doing extended fasting too regularly, that's going to stress your HPA axis, whether you're a man or a woman, right? So again, we want to give the body that time for self-rejuvenation and repair, but no, I don't think that you should do, other people can argue if they want, but I personally don't think you should do 5-day water fast every couple weeks, for a several month period. That's too much stress on the body. Yeah, I'm sure that is going to mess with your hormones and your menstrual cycles. I'm sure it's going to mess with men as well. So I think that you have to find a protocol that works well with you and then go with it. But I would give the same caveat to men or women. You can definitely push extended fasting too far or too frequently, and that in itself can be detrimental to your hormones. So next question was, does apple cider vinegar break a fast? Technically, yes. So if we're looking in the pure form, anything other than water breaks a fast. If we're looking at a more pure but slightly liberal form, water, coffee, plain tea, as long as the plain tea and coffee don't have additives in it, those will not break your fast or hinder fasting results. And actually, tea and coffee have beneficial effects, and some studies will suggest that it could potentially help upregulate autophagy. So next question says, thoughts on fasting with Hashimoto thyroiditis. So for those of you who are unaware of what Hashimoto thyroiditis is, it's basically an autoimmune condition which basically leads to hypothyroidism. So basically the question is like, can you fast when you have that type of hypothyroidism? Obviously, you would have to talk to your care professional and make sure there's nothing unique about your case. But intermittent fasting with hypothyroidism, in my experience, I've not had issues with that. But again, you would need your healthcare provider so that if you're on medications, they can titrate your meds, tell you if you need to eat them with food, do you need to adjust the time that you're taking them, the dose. So there are some things that you have to be cognizant of, but assuming that those things are being taken care of by your care provider, then many people with thyroid disease do participate in different intermittent fasting protocols. This says, and then this next question, I guess I could have read them together, sorry. Would a cup of coffee with creamer in it break my fast? Yes. All right, let me go back to the people submitting questions here. Guys got a lot of questions tonight. I love it. Okay, how do you feel about grapeseed oil? Is it better or worse than olive oil? Interesting. I don't use grapeseed oil. Are grape seeds naturally oily? I don't know. Chime in, people, with that answer. I'm gonna err on always going with olive oil if it's an oil that I don't know, because I know that olive oil is good for you. Grapeseed oil almost makes me think that it's one of those seed oils like safflower oil or sunflower oil. And those oils are horrible. So if grapeseed oil, I've never looked up grapeseed oil, but if grapeseed oil is akin to the seed oils, then I wouldn't use it because those are very inflammatory. Olive oil is a great oil. It has lots of omega-3s. It's just great for so many different things. So olive oil is like the gold standard of oils, along with avocado oils as far as I'm concerned. We can argue all day about pure butter. If it's pure grass-fed, grass-finished butter, I have no problems with it. And I also have no problems with coconut oil, even though I know many people disagree with me. So, but the ones that we should all agree on would be olive oil and avocado oil. Those are going to be probably your best bets. And okay, this is from Molbats Jackie. Is organic peppermint tea, no milk, no sugar, okay to consume during fasting? So it probably is. I mean, we're not gonna have a study on, peppermint tea versus not. I mean, I always tend to err on the side of caution of either black tea or green tea or oolong tea or some of like those herbal fermented type teas. But if it is pure peppermint using like peppermint leaves, that should be fine. I mean, I don't really get too concerned about, I mean, I make peppermint tea all summer long, and I'll drink that during my fasting window because we have natural mint growing in our herb garden. So I have like one of those tea diffuser things, and I just put my leaves in there and steep it in a hot cup of water, and that's the tea. So that's what I do, and I don't really notice any poor results. What I would say is that go ahead and consume it, and then if you feel like your results are suboptimal, switch that out for a black or green tea. All right, so now let me scroll back up to the top and see if people submitted questions as I, came on. Sorry guys, lots of hellos. Hello to everyone. Okay, this question is from the traveling tennis coach. What is your fasting window? So typically, my general fasting routine is like a 18-6 instead of a 16-8. And I typically aim for a 6-hour eating window. That's what I find works best for me consistently. And then I'll mix that up with periods of 1 meal a day, sporadically to switch it up to try to, trick my body or break through plateaus. Sometimes I'll still do the same eating window, but move the time up. So there are times where I may do like breakfast, lunch, but not dinner, or vice versa, and just flip it around. And then occasionally I'll do longer fast. But my usual routine is this 18-6. Okay, what? Oh, it won't let me scroll anymore. That's unfortunate. Let me see. Okay, so I did that question. I'm trying to scroll back up and I can't. Okay, there we go. I guess I'm gonna have to go from bottom up, guys. Sorry, because I was at the top and then it got stuck. All right, so this is from Wilted Vines, I think that's what that name. What are your thoughts on intermittent fasting during pregnancy? I feel my best when fasting. If doing 1 meal a day, as long as meeting my nutritional needs, is it safe? So I have a blog post on this actually. If you go to my website, thefastingdoctor.com, and it's called Intermittent Fasting in Pregnancy. We don't recommend intermittent fasting during pregnancy. What I try to tell people, especially the people that I work with, that's why I also harp on nutrition, because intermittent fasting is not a tool that we use during pregnancy. You really have to hone in on your nutrition. Also, healthy nutrition is something we should be honing in on pregnancy in general. I'm not sure why we've turned pregnancy into this thing where it's a smorgasbord and you eat whatever you want, because all that stuff is becoming building blocks for the baby, that you're growing. So in general, I think everyone should be eating healthy or healthily when you're pregnant, but I know that's not always the norm. But that's what I would focus on rather than fasting, would be whole real foods. Because the studies that we have of fasting in pregnancy are for a short period of time. So they're like during Ramadan, which is very discrete time. And also the goal was not weight loss or weight maintenance. So that's very different than religious fasting. So no, I don't think you have to, eat every couple hours just because you're pregnant. So you can still have 3 discrete meals a day. I don't think that means you have to start eating at night all the time just because you're pregnant, because again, you don't need to do that per se. But I really wouldn't intentionally recommend trying to do 14, 16, 18 hours or 1 meal a day intentionally while fasting. While being pregnant or lactating, honestly. All right, let me scroll back up this way because that seems to be what's working. And we may be done. Some people left comments like Keto Wiz is saying that they, like in their household, are really big fans of 1 meal a day fasting. We get the best results from it. It allows us to stay productive for a bigger part of the day. Yeah, that's what I said. As long as you get 1 meal a day down, I have no problems. I don't want to sound like I'm anti 1 meal a day. I just think that sometimes it's difficult for people to get in their calories. Someone mentioned, I feel the best when I fast for at least 16 hours, but those calories are tough to get enough of. Exactly. And so that's why you may have to have an up and down day with fasting. So you may have a day where you fast longer, and then you may have a couple times a week where you fast shorter, but still eating nutritious meals, just so that you keep your body guessing and switching it up. We're almost out of time, but I'm just scrolling through and just making sure that there wasn't any other questions. Someone asked, what about apple cider vinegar during fasting? Again, to me, that would break your fast. The other thing about apple cider vinegar, though I know some people are able to just drink it, I'll tell you one time, I don't know, I must have read something about the benefits of apple cider vinegar, and so I decided in my wisdom to try a little shot of it, and I set my whole throat on fire. I thought I was burnt a hole in my esophagus. It actually really hurt and was quite painful. So I don't actually know. I mean, I guess other people have the esophagus of steel, but I'm assuming you're diluting it, because that's the lesson I learned. But still, I would just save it for your eating window. There's lots of benefits to apple cider vinegar, so no problem with you having that, obviously assuming you don't have a reason why you shouldn't be drinking it. But I personally would just not have it in my fasting window. All right, and that is the end of the questions that people got to, at least when I got to. Oh, someone chimed in about grapeseed oil. Hold on, because like I said, I admitted that I don't know much about grapeseed oil. So Sally Sack 2018 said grapeseed oil has a high smoke point and can be used for sauteing and frying, has high vitamin E, and is touted for being good with the skin. Some people substitute it for olive oil. Okay, didn't know that. So if that's true, like I said, my concern is I just wanted to make sure it wasn't one of those safflower or whatever oils, because those are no bueno. So interesting. Paige from the Life app, she is here and she says, I do often switch from fasting 16 hours to 14 hours or less in a day to get more calories in. Exactly. So we were talking about switching up your fasting window, and that's, like I said, if you're doing 1 meal a day a few times a week, but then you decrease your fasting window and do 16 hours the next day so you get more calories in. I just think, again, you got to be cognizant and make sure you're getting your calories, because we're so programmed to thinking less calories consumed is better. And that's why the majority of people who do calories in, calories out gain their weight back, because that's actually not a good way to lose weight, not long term. And then this last question, and then I'm going to wrap it up, is it better to delay breakfast to jumpstart weight loss? What is the best way to jumpstart weight loss for beginners? So one, I think it's to analyze your diet, honestly. Again, the nutrition is what's going to carry you long term. Cut out the processed foods or decrease the processed foods. Look at what you're drinking. Decrease the even diet. Diet beverages are not your friend. decrease all that stuff, or cut out. But sometimes you got to do it graduated, because sometimes going cold turkey just leads to very hangry individuals, and none of us want to be around a bunch of hangry people. And then when you're doing intermittent fasting, it just depends. So if you're naturally not hungry in the morning, then I would say delaying breakfast or, skipping it would be the best way to start. And then you can play around with your window as need be. Pay attention to night eating though. I don't harp on people too much if they're getting results about the night eating. They already know my opinion on that. But especially if you're a chronic night eater, try to move that up and not eat as much as night. And those are great ways to start. Okay, guys. Well, I thank you so much for submitting questions. This was awesome. And we had a lot of interaction tonight, and we will probably pick this back up in a couple weeks. It's baseball and soccer season for our kids, so it just depends on if we have a game or not. But hopefully we'll get more of these Q&As in. All right, have a good night. Bye. Oh, and also forgot to tell you, some people are asking about other ways to contact me, or just interact with more people about intermittent fasting. I do have a Facebook group. It's called The Fasting Doctor. And then you can also find me on my blog, which is thefastingdoctor.com. There are links to several podcasts that I've done discussing intermittent fasting. So if you want some more detail, you can listen to my podcast or come and hang out with us in the Facebook group. All right, have a good night.